weeks. A new study shows that ultra-warm water in the Gulf of Mexico supercharged Hurricane Helene, and human-caused climate change likely heated that water. Joining me now to discuss is Professor Michael Mann of the University of Pennsylvania. Professor Mann, thank you so much for being with us. I want to note you are the author of Our Fragile Moment, How Lessons from Earth's Past Can Help Us Survive the Climate Crisis. Let's talk about how climate change is fueling these storms. What role do you think climate change played in these two back-to-back hurricanes that we've seen in Florida and other states, I should note, in the past few weeks?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. It's good to be with you. And it's pretty clear. As I like to say, this isn't rocket science. It's actually very basic physics that tells us that when you heat up the oceans and you evaporate more moisture into the atmosphere, it's actually that evaporated moisture that provides the energy to intensify these storms. It's also that evaporated moisture that provides the moisture that's turned into record rainfall and flooding. And there are estimates that we see a roughly 12% increase in the maximum sustained wind speeds with these storms for each degree Celsius of warming, nearly 2 degrees Fahrenheit warming. And that's about as much as the Atlantic has warmed up this century. So that's a 12% increase in the maximum wind speeds. But it turns out that the destructive potential, what we call power dissipation, how much damage a storm can do, actually is proportional to the third power of those wind speeds. So that 12% turns into a 40% increase in the destructive potential of these storms with regard to wind damage. And we're seeing that. And in fact, there was an estimate that with Helene, the rainfall, the flooding that killed hundreds of people in the southeastern US was increased by 50% by human-caused warming. So that's not just a subtle impact. There is a profound impact that human-caused warming from burning fossil fuels and the production of carbon pollution, there is a major impact that is having in terms of the damage and deadliness of these storms.
Professor, when you look at the pace, the frequency of these storms, is there enough data from recent years to say whether there's sort of steady growth fueled by climate change of the number of these storms, or is it more exponential? How much are these storms being fueled by climate change growing in terms of frequency?
Yeah, I mean, again, when you look at the strongest storms, the sort of Cat 4, Cat 5 monster storms, we see a steady increase. And steady's bad enough. As I like to say, the truth is bad enough. It's not exponential, but it's steady, which means that every additional degree that we warm the planet leads to a steady increase, in the intensity of these storms, the damage that's done. Here's the good news. The warming stops when we bring our carbon emissions to zero. So if we can rapidly decarbonize our infrastructure, get away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy, we can stop the warming of the planet, the warming of the oceans that is driving these ever dangerous and ever damaging storms.
And we know what a tall task that is. And in the meantime, one of the more disturbing reactions to what we've been seeing are these reports of meteorologists getting death threats as they try to bat down and push back against conspiracy theories. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, it's really disturbing. It's part of a trend. As a climate scientist decades ago, I was attacked. My colleagues were attacked when we presented evidence that was a threat to powerful vested interests, the fossil fuel industry, the politicians, mostly one of the two parties, really the Republican Party, that has supported their agenda. I was attacked by them decades ago because of my work establishing the significance of human-caused warming. And today we have seen a metastasization of that bad faith extend to all matters of public discourse. And even, weather presenters are being threatened, and emergency managers, FEMA employees are being threatened simply because the facts that they are presenting might be inconvenient, again, to some of those powerful vested interests. One of the two parties, the Republican Party, has taken, almost as gospel that climate change is a hoax, and they have attacked scientists who are talking about the threat of climate change, and their plan, Project 2025, would actually eliminate NOAA because they don't like the climate messaging coming out of the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. But NOAA is also the agency that supports those hurricane hunters that fly into storms, collecting data so that we can make more accurate forecasts of the path and the destruction of these storms.
Yeah, people who should know better, public officials included, really helping fuel a lot of this disinformation. Professor Michael Mann of the University of Pennsylvania, thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you.